abroad. The way they did explain that we can offer FDIC insurance on foreign capital holdings if they're held with the trust company, but it's a bit of a headache to try and figure that out. But what you end up with at the end is essentially a US-based bank account. I believe it might be an FBO account that you can essentially extend these banking services to people across the world, as long as they're not in an OFAC country, so Syria, North Korea, Venezuela. Unfortunately, we're not able to work in these countries, but places like Latin America, Southeast Asia, people in these countries pay up to $50,000 per year for a US-based bank account. We can essentially offer that for $5. It won't be the exact same as a bank account, but you're also not subject to a lot of the AML and KYC compliance restraints. So you won't be able to send, you won't be able to receive from a third party, but you can send to a third party. We do have a workaround for this, working with 2 or 3 different PFPs, but we SEC compliance and regulation is the number one concern for us. So the application, USDV or fiat-backed stablecoin, is essentially going to power these systems. So if we have the application in Latin America and the US, there's only 2 differences between those, and that's just localization. One of those is the source of funds that we prove. So we have a banking partner in Brazil and a few other countries, and then we have one for Vietnam and one for the US, obviously. So there's the 3 reasons that we intend to target. One of the biggest challenges that we face with this is the adoption. Another reason why USDV kind of leads people in. So perpetual yield stablecoin that's FDIC insured and SEC regulated, to me, makes a lot of sense. We also anticipate a lot of the slack to come from the cryptocurrency communities. We're essentially tied to capital markets. We are speaking to some people that hopefully can come in and take a lot of the kind of traditional finance discussions, so they can kind of lead the way with those. I intend to lead a lot of the blockchain discussions and the technological advances within the project. And to be honest, we're really looking forward, so excited to get this out the door. It's been very exciting to work with a project with this much potential, but to see it kind of come into fruition is, just a reward in itself. Knowing that there's people around the world that don't have access to financial services, and we're going to be able to offer them a compliant solution, that's also kind of future-proof, but also able to pay these people. To me, that's very rewarding. There's no amount of volunteer work that can kind of come back to putting money in someone else's hands. So we really anticipate a lot of growth for this. We've been speaking to a lot of the capital lending markets and new partners, but one of the kind of criteria is that Vemanti needs a controlling stake. Even if not controlling stake, at least some control over the direction of the company. This is, not just to make sure that the capital is in safe hands, but it also means that it profits Vemanti. So there's lots of parts of this project that kind of benefit Vemanti, then also benefit the project in itself. The biggest thing besides the SEC regulation is the real use case of solution. We really want to solve these problems for a lot of these people. So the web app comes first. This is essentially a native mobile application. It won't be available on Apple Store or it won't be available on these app stores just yet. But that's only because we need to gather some data in terms of devices used and stuff. So to speed up the native mobile app development, we're going to be using the web app for now. Perfectly fine, much safer, much secure. We don't have to concern ourselves too much with different clones and different people trying to hijack systems or anything, because when you're dealing with other people's funds, to me, you have to be very careful. Not just in terms of regulation, but there's a huge amount of trust that comes when someone is, giving you an investment or whatever you want to call it. Another problem that we have is these people, the underbanked, the unbanked, $500 is, could be someone's life savings. When you're only getting paid $1 per hour, $500 could lead up to a month potentially. So even though it's a relatively small amount, we do want to make sure that even every single dollar is essentially protected well. So as I said before, we do have plans for foreign currencies, but USDV right now is the main kind of oil that we're using for the ecosystem. There's been a few people that have asked us about deflation and any strategies we have against USDV slippage, and etc. My answer to that is just simple arbitrage. Once the capital is deployed, it's essentially in a foreign currency anyway. So there's even the chance that we could have to create a liability against the reserve and then pay that back as the USD slips. The amount of monetization within this project is phenomenal. Every time it seems that we have a meeting to discuss the progress, there's always like an extra 2 or 3 use cases that we just happen to throw out. I think the one of the biggest difficulties we have is trying to narrow the most effective path. Once we have the capital, once USDV is deployed and people can interact within the marketplace, there's huge amounts that we can do to monetize this. Because there's a few companies out there that say they bridge DeFi and CeFi, but they also claim to be layer 2, but they build on some random protocol, and there's a lot of hearsay in the blockchain industry. Vemanti will actually be the first to bridge capital markets with decentralized finance. Like that's a given. I mean, all these other projects talking about we're going to, next quarter, we intend to. But Vemanti has been building this for quite a while now, so they haven't made any announcements. So the PR announcements, you're not going to get PR announcements for a PR announcement. You know what I mean? With Vemanti, you're going to get a PR announcement about our project, and it's going to be really exciting to put this into your guys' hands and see how you guys feel about it. So I think that gives a pretty good rundown of what we've been doing. The white paper. Okay, so the legal team asked why we need a white paper, and I explained it's kind of a given for a lot of people to read through, contain some detail and stuff. One of the cybersecurity auditors did come back and say that we put too much information about the technicals inside, and that we should really reconsider releasing a lot of the stuff to refrain from people trying to exploit. Just makes their report much easier, I guess. Also, I'm not a designer. I'm not a graphic designer. So my design work I thought was fine. But Tan has very good high standards, and he was saying, no, we need this to be, it needs to look much better. It's difficult to understand. There's been a few times where we've sat down with a legal team and have asked us to explain, even with a whiteboard, and it's been quite difficult. Only because of the infrastructure for a lot of these is quite complicated. There's lots of different entities that need to communicate with each other, not just technologically, but also legally. And then there's different jurisdictions that we need to adhere to. So it is quite a complicated tokenomic structure. The capital market side is relatively easy to understand, but that's only because there's like 200 years, right, of regulation and framework compliance. So the tokenomics is a little tricky to understand, but hopefully when the graphic designer comes back with some diagrams and things, it's much easier for everyone to understand. So how it works is essentially we have a reserve that we mint outside the US, and then within the US, people can interact with that. One of the things that we cannot do is promote the purchase of USDV, but we can promote the use case, which is also the remittance platform. So within this platform, people are going to be able to buy and sell different cryptocurrencies. Normally, like some of the top 10, not every cryptocurrency, it's not an exchange, but we also intend to have a P2P transaction, but that won't be in the June launch. That may be July, maybe the month or two after the launch of the web app. But from the beginning, people can store, buy, sell a couple of different stablecoin options. That's a given. That's already been in. Right now, we're just in kind of like the UI UX redesigning phases. So there's just a couple of reiterations we have to go through for that. Planning for localization, of course. We're having a animated video explainer. This should hopefully a quick 50, 60 seconds that can explain the project in a little bit more detail so people can understand about it. This is also intended to be localized. Excuse me. So yeah, and then someone was asking about the white paper. So yeah, we're basically just waiting for the graphic design to come back. And then when we've been making some PR announcements later this week, hopefully that should be in the next few weeks. How reliable will the rate of return? Okay, so the rate of return is guaranteed, but the rate is not guaranteed. So we can guarantee that we are able to offer an interest or reward, a yield. There's different terminologies that we can use really. The rate of it is to be determined. That really depends on market demand. How much capital is available to be deployed, how many people are borrowing, how fast are the repayments, are people, extending loans, etc. It all really comes down to the liability asset. So there's no guarantee on what that rate is, but we can guarantee the return. That isn't really going to be like 1%. Realistically, 5% and over for token holders. Vemanti takes a cut essentially of the interest generated, obviously for operating costs and everything, but it's really not much. It's unnoticeable really by the token holders. We also plan to partner with a lot of these DeFi existing infrastructures. If you think of Celsius Compound, Aave, UMA, multiple different projects really. We can work with those to subsidize their interest rates. So if someone was to go and stake through those, for example, and then earn their 3 or 4%, we would subsidize that. Token yield as well. A couple of things worth noting as well. A couple of things that we intend to launch later this year. The social impact fund. That's definitely going to be interesting. Ideally, people are going to be able to interact with the system and determine where a lot of the capital is deployed. This is going to be for, if you look at like women in business, or there's young agriculture, a couple of other social impact loans really around developing regions. There's nothing wrong with making profit from essentially social impact. Every business needs to make a profit. But we want to enable a lot of these social impact projects and initiatives. One of the ones that we recently discussed was MasterCard in Africa, for some agricultural stuff out there. That was very interesting. And we want to try and replicate that with Southeast Asia, really, and try and bring these big capital institute players into developing regions, but also profiting everyone, not just the domestic economy where the initiative is located and intended to operate, but also the businesses that are investing, the capital players that are essentially getting involved with social impact. I think that may be everything. I think I've grabbed all the questions. If anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in the Telegram group and comment them. There's some things, unfortunately, that I can't discuss. I can't discuss shares, for example. There's some other projects that Tan's been working on that I'm pretty sure I'm not allowed to discuss. So there's some things that I just don't know, and there's some things that I'm not sure, but probably best not to mention. Okay, here's a question. Kind of circulation of USDV is VMNT hoping in a year's time. In a year's time, we'd like to have like 100 million USDV, but the thing is they're not created out of thin air. So for every $1 with the trust company, there's always one USDV, and that's only removed when that USDV is taken out of the equation. there's no limit essentially. You know, I mean, even if we wanted $1 trillion, that is possible. But as long as one of those, in the, I think I'm in the wrong Zoom account. Sorry, guys. As long as one USDV is in the trust account, it's perfectly fine, and it's safe, it's secured. So that's really the biggest thing. So we'd like to have 100 million, 10 billion USDV tokens out, but it really just depends on the adoption from different communities. And to be honest, we think a safe generating perpetual yield stablecoin is the answer to a lot of these, DeFi degens dreams. A lot of these projects are promising 500% APY, 3,000% APY, but then in 3 days' time, because there's that many people that got involved, it drops down to 2%, 3% APY. And that's just unfeasible. And a lot of the times you're getting rewarded in some sort of random altcoin, with no use case, very questionable team. Most of them are just cash grabs, really just cash grabs. So USDV is, a much more transparent process than that. Someone actually mentioned on Twitter that there's only me. It's just that we don't have the need to promote the team. They're always working. Some of them don't really feel comfortable putting themselves out there, which is fine. But it's not just me. Don't worry about it. It's not just me. Let me see if there's any other questions. I don't think there is. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, we're talking about magic internet money, how USDV is not magic internet money, how it's actually tied to capital markets, which to me is, extremely interesting. It's a true bridge of blockchain and capital markets. It's projects like USDV and companies like Vemanti are the ones that are going to be pushing innovation. I mean, if you think about Google versus Yahoo back in the day, even to now, to be honest, like the reason why Yahoo didn't beat Google was that Yahoo was focused on, as a search engine, Yahoo is focused on keeping people in the search engine, right? But Google was focused on getting them off. You know what I mean? Google's main challenge was getting people the result they wanted and getting them off Google ASAP. Yahoo was focused on keeping them on the page. Okay, here's your search results. Do you want to look at something else? Here's some adverts that, So it's companies like Vemanti that push innovation with new technologies. And blockchain, even though it's been around for, realistically, 10 years, 9 years, we're still in the black and white era if we compare it to cinema. There's a lot of discussion about these new, like, NFTs have been around since 2016. It's only starting to get adoption now. So a lot of these things that, have a huge trend, they're not just out of the blue. They need a while to kind of prove themselves. And honestly, blockchain has been proven many, many times over how unique of a use case and how powerful the solutions can be. So to me, now is the best time to launch a stablecoin, without a doubt. Regulators are looking at the industry. Large-scale competitors may get discouraged because they may think it's too late. But if you look at the other stablecoins that are out there right now, it's quite questionable. No worries, Diego. Thank you very much. Let's go. Yeah, honestly, I'm really looking forward to it. You guys can post questions in the Telegram group. I'll get round to them as soon as I can. I'm normally operating between different time zones right now, so it's 6:30 for me. But I had a call at 4 hours ago with the US team. So I do try to get around to them as much as possible. I never use Twitter. I haven't used it since 2012. I've tried to use it every now and again. I'm just not that advanced with social media, I guess. So feel free to just give me a nudge or a mention if you want something answered. More than happy to. I really appreciate you guys joining. The next one, we'll might be a Zoom link, might be a YouTube stream that we can kind of keep out there and keep people being promoted. I'll see if any of the team want to jump on the next one, maybe at 6 a.m., maybe a little bit later. But yeah, I really appreciate your time, guys. So next week we'll just have a quick discussion on maybe a quick recap of what the project is, and then we'll carry on going with the updates and things like that. But yeah, pay attention to the Telegram group, guys. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. Look forward to the next one. Thank you.